Welcome to this episode of the Gunman. In this video I'll be taking you through the prep and paint work, also masking and everything it takes to get this car painted. So the colour code is JJX and the paint name is, colour name is Indigo Blue Metallic. So I'm starting off here just by getting a couple of clean rags, and I'm just putting normal water on them, and I'm going to start cleaning around my blend areas, taking extra time inside these areas where the mouldings were, because there's lots of dirt that's built up over the years inside there. So I've found that most of the time all you need is just water over your blend areas. Sometimes if you've got some grease or any oil-based contaminants, you can then use a solvent-based wax and grease remover or Prepsol, something like that, to clean those off. But I've found most of the time all you need is just water, and then you just dry it off with a dry rag after that, and then we can go on with dry sanding. So next up, I'm just giving you a quick look at what I do to get my colour. I'll just give it a quick hand polish up depending on how bad it's gone. If it's really bad, you might want to give it a buff up. So you give it a good wipe down with that polishing cloth. Make sure you've removed all the polishing film, and then just take a few readings with this spectrophotometer. We can then link that up to our computer, mix and match our colour. So next up, I'm getting the guide coat, which is this black powder. So basically it's just charcoal powdered down, and it allows me to see what I have and haven't sanded. So next up, I've grabbed some 240 grit on the block, and I'm blocking over our repaired areas. So it turns out that this fender was repaired, and there was only one small patch that was repaired on the roof. So I'm just making sure I cover up the interior so I don't get too much dust on it. And it turns out that there was only one small repair on the roof, so I didn't end up needing to block the whole thing. It was just faded paint for the rest of it, so we'll just sand it down with the orbital sander. So I then re-guide coated it, and now I'm using 400 grit to remove those 240 grit scratches, and I'm using also a interface pad or a soft pad in between the hard pad of this orbital sander, as to make sure that you don't get any sand any grooves into it with the hard pad. So I'm going over the whole roof with 400. As I said, so it was about 1.5 hours this video all up, but I've edited it down to about 23 minutes. So we take you right through from start to finish. Once we get into the spray booth and we've masked it all up, I'll slow the footage down, but most of it's sped up to double speed just to stop the vid from getting too long, and you can still see exactly what I'm doing. So just continuing over that roof with the 400 grit, just making sure you don't miss any spots. You don't want to leave it so it's not sanded, or else my fresh paint's not going to stick to it. So once I've done that, I'll just give it another dust off in between that. That's what I did before. I missed out on that in the footage, but I'm then grabbing one of these 500 grit, is these soft pads that I'm using. So you use 500 grit if you're putting colour over it, and you use 800 grit if you're only wanting to blend over it, if you're wanting to put your clear over it. So around the primed areas it's 500, and around your cleared areas it's 800. So I'm just going around taking extra caution, make sure you don't miss any of those big thick primer edges that would be left behind, or else when you paint over them they'll look pretty bad and you'll have to redo it probably. So next up, once that's all done, I've given another dust off. In between each stage you make sure you dust them off so you can inspect and make sure you haven't missed anything. And next up, I'm just going over the blend areas with some 600 grits, what I'm using. Lots of guys like to use 800 or even up to 1000 some guys use, because they're a bit worried that they may cut through on the edges. But I've found that you can see here that this is still my first bit of 600, so I've found it's a bit more efficient. You go through less sandpaper, and it's also sometimes quicker just to do it with 600. So, but if you're worried you're going to cut through on edges, just go 800. So. And once I've finished sanding over all these edges with the 600 on the orbital sander, I'll end up cleaning it off once again and I can't stress that too much, mate. When you're doing dry sanding, you must just be extremely clean. So just keep blowing it off between each stage, and yeah, you will have good results. I found it is a lot quicker than wet sanding, than using the Scotch paste and a bucket. You end up with water all over the ground. You end up with water all inside those mouldings, and loads of water you've got to clean off. It's especially bad in winter, in the colder months. You got to blow the car. It used to take a good 10 minutes to blow the car off after sanding, whereas when you're doing dry sanding, it's just a quick dust off and you're done. So yeah, so just going over the rest of these blend areas, and then once that's done, as I said, we'll go over those blend areas by hand using 800 grit on one of those softback sponges, the same as what I used for the primed areas. So the only thing that I've left out on this video is the clear coat, but I uploaded the clear coat on this video a few weeks ago. It's called Review and Demonstration on the TE20 Air Cap for the Pro Light, DeVilbiss GTI Pro Light. So I'll put a link at the end of the vid if you want to see the clear coat, if you want to continue watching. So I've just left it out of this video because I already have one that covers it. So as I say, just giving it a good dust off in between. And then just double check over, make sure you haven't missed anything. It turned out that there was a bit of clear that started flaking off over on that fender. And I found a small little chip or a scratch in the fender as well. So I've come up to my bench, grabbed this polyester filler. I'm using the Worth brand, which is pretty good. You don't want to over harden it, just a small amount. I think the ratio is actually 50:1, just so it's just enough to turn it to a light pink colour. If it's too red, then you can actually get the hardening will bleed through once you paint it. But this stuff is over paintable. There's no need to prime it. That's what I really like about this Worth brand. So yeah, now I've just got the 800 grit on the hand sanding sponge. And I'm actually going over the top of all of those 600 scratches, so it's bringing it down to a finer grade as well, so I'm not going to see any sanding scratches once I clear over it as well. So that's another advantage of going over it with 800. I like to do directional sanding as well. I try not to do too many circles. Lots of guys do the circles, but I find that the paint can actually pull up in those circles and you can end up just not getting such nice of a finish. So I like to directional sand with the direction of the body of the car. Just take extra time around these areas because it's where it's going to flake up on the edges. Once you get a stone chip there, then it can start peeling up. So there's a couple of links to a couple of other vids at the very end as well, and we've got a quick look at the car once it's finished off too. It's not 100% finished off, but it's out the back in the detailing bay being polished up. So just going around all those edges still with the 800 soft pad. And by the time I've finished doing that, that filler will have dried. So it hasn't ended up slowing me down. I'm not sitting around waiting for that filler to dry. We can then come back with the orbital sander and sand it back. So that's that patch there on the fender where the clear started flaking up from the previous clear. So I'll then just come back and sand that out, and we'll have to puff a bit of colour over it when I'm painting it. So just feathering that out with the hard pad. I've taken the soft pad off, so I want to get it a bit flatter. Just finish it off by hand again, going over that with the 800 again. Pulling all that masking off and then going over with the air blower just again, and this is the final blow off before it goes in the booth, so give it a real good one. Some people like to, when doing dry sanding, prep sol or wax and grease remove prior to masking. I've done it both ways, and I've found it's not necessary to prep sole before you paint it. So I've found to get exactly the same results, but you're just putting an extra step in. So it's up to you if you want to do that. Once that's all done, we'll then take it into the booth and start masking up. So I'm just back masking here to start off with around these boot areas. It turned out that the panel beater decided to come in and pull those mouldings out. I was asking him all morning around those windscreens, and he waited until I was in the spray booth to unmask it, to pull them out, so those windscreen mouldings. So. So you just go around all your edges. You don't want the tape too close to where you're painting, so I like to pull it back off the edge just a touch. And come around doing all the bumper bar and that, back masking through the wheel arches too. Usually we'd pull those body moulds off, but it was for a car yard, and they usually like to cut corners, the car yards, and he doesn't want to pay the extra money, plus they'd already been masked up prior as well, the previous time, so whoever did it last time did the same thing. Just back masking inside the door jambs as well. Any questions, I'll happily be answered. I answer a lot of questions through my Facebook page, and I've decided that any questions are probably better off posted as a general question to the page itself. Asking private questions is no dramas. I don't mind it. I've been doing it for quite a while, but I've started to think that if you post it as a public post to the page itself, well then other people can read it, and they can probably learn as well. They can put their input in as well. I don't mind if anyone else is willing to answer some questions. It's just make it, and don't be embarrassed if you don't know something. Yeah, I just say you may as well just ask a public question. That's what I've decided. So it's going around all these edges and cutting it out with a good, nice, sharp razor blade, and then just taping it down. Turned out that was a bit blunt. Go around and grab a sharp one. It's annoying when they're blunt, so they're not expensive for a pack. I think it's about $20 for 100 of them. So this video covers pretty much everything except for the clear coat, as I said, what you need to do to get a car painted. And I've missed out on the colour matching as well, so I showed you what I do to mix the colour up, but if you want to see colour matching, check through some of my other vids. I've got loads of colour matching vids as well. And there's no polishing in this one as well. I've left out the polishing stage, mainly due to the fact that I don't do much polishing. The guy out the back does most of my polishing. I do have a couple of polishing videos though, if you'd like to see a couple of how to get rid of runs and just some polishing blacks without swirl marks and stuff like that. So now just going over the top of all that back masking again, over the top of that to make sure we don't get any paint seeping through. Making sure your masking is all nice and tight so that when you use the high pressure air to blow it off, that it's not going to start flapping up and pulling off and landing back in your paint. So I have edited this. I haven't included every single part of the masking, but just giving you a good idea of how it's done. So next up, we're coming out, getting our colour and clear ready. So I'm using a 2:1 clear, so it's 2 parts clear and then 1 part hardener, which we then use a further 10% reducer. So this was the maiden voyage with the maiden run with my GTI Pro light. I used the T20 Air Cap on it, but as I said, that's in that next video, which will have an annotation to at the end, and you can check it out if you want to keep watching. And then we just put that base coat colour into the other gun, and we're right to go in. And I won't have to leave the spray booth once I've entered the booth. I won't have to leave, which is a good thing, good idea to do that sometimes if you really want to get a nice clean paint job, because sometimes if you come out into the workshop, you're gathering dust on yourself from the guys that are out here sanding and stuff like that. So Indigo Blue. Now I'm in the booth here again, back in, got my paint in, so I've got the heat running as well, 25 to 30 degrees. And then these are the wax and grease removing cloths. They're good, these ones, because they don't have much lint or fibres on them to create little bits of dust. They don't leave anything behind, so that's what I like about them. I got given them by the head of DeVilbiss Australia when he gave me my gun. He wanted some feedback on them. They're quite good too. He gave me a couple of other things as well, like some bumper prep pads and some bumper cleaning wipes too. So I'll do some videos on them when I get the chance to. And then we just wipe on and we also wipe off. So you take note of how I actually did the quarter panels first, and I'm doing my blend areas first. And then after that I did the primed areas. That's as to not get dirty primer dust on the rags, and then drag that primer dust through your blend areas. So, and wiping down the airline too, dusting myself off, final dust off of myself. So it's stuff like that, like wiping your airline down, which is that little 1% that makes that small bit of difference in between getting a clean job and not a clean job. So I just missed a couple of bits of masking there, so going over it, always checking what you have, what you've done, always checking over the job. So just using the high pressure air here with the tack cloth, is that yellow thing there I'm using. It's sticky, but it's safe. It's not going to leave any grease or anything behind. Keep up to date with all my latest videos by subscribing to my channel. There's also a link at the end. Check out the channel, there's some playlists I've made up. I'm constantly working on it to make it better. Any comments, questions are more than welcome. Like, share. So this is a pretty important stage, the blowing off part. It's the final step before spray painting. So it's the last chance to get rid of any little bits of dust that you may have landing on your panel. You may not see them, but they're still there. So I treat my spray booth like a bit of a quarantine area. No one's allowed in or out of the booth once I'm painting. I finished painting a car the other day and my apprentice ran in because he left something in there, and I just yelled at him. I said, "Get out, mate, that's bad luck. Not allowed in there, I don't want any dust landing on my paint jobs." So I'm putting bits of paper over these quarter panels because I've got to paint that boot spoiler, but I don't want overspray all over the quarter panels. And now I've slowed it down to single speed, just instead of doubling it up like the rest of the video, just for our base coat. So the settings I'm using on this gun, which is the DeVilbiss GTI Pro with the H1 HVLP Air Cap on it. So the settings are 1, the fluid right out, so it's basically just hanging in by a couple of threads. Open the fan right up and set the pressure to about 25 psi or 1.7 bar. Give or take a little bit here or there. It turned out that I just scraped through with having enough colour on this. If you want to drop the pressure down a touch, you'll probably find that you save a little bit of colour. I ended up going a touch lighter on with my last coat than what I usually would have, but I had to match the colour and I didn't want to have to come out and go through that stage again. So it turned out I just got it covered up. It looked fine outside, so if you're not sure if you got your colour covered up, you can go out, grab your sun gun, which is what I've got, a 3M sun gun, or even just a light, some sort of a torch or something, just to make sure it's not see-through. So we're blending through that fender. I'm only putting colour over where that repair was, where the primed area was. We're blending through those quarters as well. I'm not putting colour over the entire quarter panel. I was actually extremely happy with how this job came up in the end. It was yeah, the first job, as I mentioned before, with that Pro Light, and I was just yeah, just wanted to make it look as good as I could, and it was extremely nice finish on it. To be absolutely honest, it's probably a little bit too flat for the rest of the car. The rest of the car had more orange peel than what I put on. I don't usually do that. I usually try to replicate, but I was just playing around. I was having fun. So after our second coat, we've basically got our colour covered up, and we just need to put the technique coat over the top of that. You can see it's going on nice and clean, there's no big dusty patches, and spray painting is a procedure, and if you follow the steps correctly, then there's no reason everyone shouldn't be able to get the same results as me. Spotting a little bit of colour over that patch where the clear was flaking up, and as I said, we're starting to run a bit low on colour, so I'm just going to quickly get this last coat over, just make sure I get a tech coat over the whole thing. I'm just altering my trigger work a bit. I didn't actually adjust the setting on the fluid at all, but I'm just feathering the trigger in a bit more. So that masking's right to pull off now that I've done the boot spoiler. Bit of masking there I wasn't quite happy with, so I just touched that up. So I'll do the blend over this fender next. That's mainly to make sure I had enough colour over here to do that, because as I said, I'm starting to run low. Tack Coat and Blend Coat's now done. Blend down these pillars and just do that Tack Coat over the top of this roof. So I mixed up 200 mils of colour, which I probably could have gone a little bit more. Probably should have mixed up 250, 300, but it turned out okay in the end anyway, so it's the main thing. There we go, I didn't even have quite enough to put over the front edge, but it was already covered anyway, so it was pretty much perfect amount of paint. So this is the car when it's been polished up. It turned out that I missed it when it was all detailed. They ended up polishing the entire car up, so I missed it once it had been finished washed. So this is the best footage I got of it. I've got to be quicker else I miss them a lot of the time. And just here is the clear coat, the one on the right there, and you can also check out the NSI Water review and demo if you've already seen the Pro Light demo. So thanks again for watching. This has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.